hopefully it's smoother than last time. Thank you kindly for doing all this due diligence for recordings again. But yeah, So I guess we can start wherever we want with how this indigenous systems design of turtle, wolf, and bear relates to decision making specifically. We've kind of had these sessions about the more informal organization part, some of the aspects of horizontality, how clans relate to uh, core values of a given collective as well, and how you can attach core values to the clans, as core values of indigenous cosmology is attached to the clans, right? You can attach everything from protections to ecosystems to, core values of open source, privacy, right? Can't be evil, right? To the respective clans as a way of building in um, the tracking of morphology of all of these core values, the preservation of these core values going forward. So we've kind of talked about uh, some of the more general aspects of turtle wolf and bear, which are just as important, it seems, as the more specific decision-making protocols that, again, leverage this clan design for streamlining decision-making of as many voices as possible. Um, in the protocols, right, of just formally deciding something, right, after it's went through consensus in preliminary phases between the clans. So, yeah, I think we can leave the floor open to getting into more specifics of this for folks who are less familiar, like Hero. Leading questions are welcome too from folks like Haas and Merrick. All of the above. But yeah, I think that might be a good starting place for today's session. Again, it's still up in the air if you guys want to have any lingering things on your mind or any leftovers from previous sessions. We can go that route first, but that'll be my contribution likely once we get into it. But again, thank you all for being here, and thanks for recording. Hopefully it's going smooth.
I can start with kind of a bit of a question, I guess. So we've talked before, like, we've talked about this kind of informal turtle, wolf, and bear, and kind of just naming it as we can see it appear in different, like, kind of emergent spaces. Um, um, and now, if we're talking about a more like formal decision making, I guess, how do we know when um, it's time to make that formal decision to switch from something that's been kind of like informally um, deliberated upon, and what's the trigger maybe, or how do we know when it's time for that to be at a formal decision making level? That can be my question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think, and maybe it gets us into some of introduction into the consensus flow in some way, shape, or form, right? At least in dialogue. Um, Hero, did you have something to say? I see you're unmuted. I don't want to jump the gun here and get into the answer. Uh, but if not, it's an interesting question, right? Because it seems to bring in uh, what is an important catalyst of the uh, formal decision making processes, and what is the overall catalyst, right, in the more general uh, organization, right, of the system design. It's the Wolf Clan, right, the well, these folks have these traits, characteristics of always moving, of facilitating, of gathering the minds in consensus, um, being a catalyst and an initiator, right? This is who brings issues to the floor in the formal decision making process, and for that, this is who picks up issues when there's been, excuse me, a lodging of issues in the well, right? This point of access, this point of autonomy to your voice being heard, right at the center of the council processes, right, of a given system. And so this is how issues eventually make their way into preliminary clan meetings, and then into the formal decision making between the clans, where there's not much deliberation 9 times out of 10, right? It's just a validation and a formalizing of what's already been understood in consensus in the meetings prior to the formal meeting, right? And so I think that's kind of the entire flow, except for that one time where there is a need for deliberation to keep an issue alive between the wolf and the bear clan in the decision making process. But it's only the representatives as well, if I'm not mistaken, that are speaking in these on the floor at least in these formal decision making processes. I think there's a moment of when there is that 1 time out of 10 where there's deliberation, the clans may go into their respective groups, right, and then come back out, but it's still only the representatives speaking on the floor, right? And so this is kind of the whole flow that we're familiar with so far, as folks learning these protocols from the Longhouse. But I hope that answers your question. I think there is one other nuance where there's some issues that could probably get they're smaller, right? Like just asking for direction in a given system, that maybe doesn't make its way into formal decision making because it gets resolved beforehand, right? Maybe the Wolf Clan head or Wolf Clan subhead, answers the question just more informally, right? If it's smaller, but yeah, like important announcements or important grievances, points of learning that are not just for one person but for the collective, right? That might make its way into the preliminary meetings and formal decision making. The bigger structural changing things, or what have you. But I hope that makes sense. Little insight into the consensus flow as well. But thank you kindly for the question. I hope that for here on, that might be some of your first time hearing this particular flow and the function of the clans in this bottom up decision making processes.
Is there like some sort of flow chart of what you just described?
There's a spec that kind of spells all of this out in very
like in words, like in
yeah, and it can very easily be made into a flow chart, and maybe that's
might help, like like people who not very intelligent like me, like just read from the chart. It's just easier. I think it might help like a lot of people, because I'm not like a text person. I do like it when I read like articles and stuff, but generally speaking, I just find like simpler stuff easier. And I think probably a lot of people might find that quite handy as maybe as additional. You still need the original, but yeah. But I think going off what Merrick was saying, I think a little bit back to what we were saying earlier. I think if we were to actually test it out once, how this flows, I think it becomes so much easier to understand once we get our hands on it. Like it's even if I have the chart, but if I don't use it, if I don't use the actual product or the consensus flow, want is harder to appreciate. I think if we all just give it a try, of a real thing or arbitrary things, I think it will become much more easier to comprehend or to digest. I don't know what's the word, but yeah.
Oh, of course, 100%. And maybe that's something we have ready before we start, bringing folks into testing that consensus flow, right? We have some nice diagrams to show them that, bring those traits. We'll have diagrams already into somewhat, right? Into connection to the decision-making process, right? As we're starting to uncover for some folks, right, in this session here, right? If you weren't aware of the function of the well or the function of WolfClan in formal decision-making processes of consensus. So yeah. But yeah, Merrick, I saw that you unmuted there for a second. Welcome, Ryder, by the way. We're just getting into what might be a session, at least at the beginning, still open-ended, right? A little bit focused on the consensus flow, right? Which houses, demonstrated for a couple of us earlier today, how far he's gotten. But also, one angle of Turtle Wolf and Bear that we haven't necessarily spoken to yet, or although we've spoken about some of the general organization, in the system design, right? How it relates to how we relate to each other, but we haven't necessarily got into the specifics of how the different clans and the traits of the different clans correspond to formal decision-making processes and protocols that we've been learning from the Longhouse through the years. So yeah, that's where we are, and we got a question from Merrick about how issues make their way to formal decision-making processes, right? How did your voice get from an issue lodged in the well all the way to formal decision-making processes? And we've had some back and forth on that, and then you've came in. So yeah, welcome. Thank you kindly for joining us as always. But yeah, well, I'll leave the floor open. Merrick, I saw you had unmuted briefly. I don't know if you had some crosstalk or some additions to your question.
Yeah, I'll get back to that, and I just wanted to build a little bit off of what Hero was talking about there about like flowchart as like talking about it as an explanation versus like visualizing it with a flowchart, then versus like actually experiencing and going through it, right? And I think that's something that I've been kind of picking up on from interactions with the Longhouse is like that they're big on that experiential education, right, and learning the protocols from actually living them, and it kind of fits into the vibe of the two-row wampum being a living treaty. That's less direct, but yeah, and particularly in that conversation that we'd had with Stacks and Longhouse about a virtual Longhouse and like having people learn council process by actually walking through that 3D representation of a longhouse and living it and experiencing it. So yeah, I just kind of want to throw that in there. And then my question from before was a little nuance. You mentioned, Harold, talking about that it'll only be the representatives of the clan talking on the floor in that formal council deliberation space. And is that, I think that's maybe the first time I've picked up on that. And like
For clarification, I believe that that one time out of 10, if there is there needs to be space for deliberation, right? For whatever reason, it's not that nobody speaks in the council except for the representatives, but they're the only ones who are actually speaking on the floor, if I'm not mistaken, right? It's the representatives, the speakers of each specific clan, and the Wolf Clan representative is the speaker of a given nation, for example, right? So they're the ones who are initiating things, bringing things onto the floor, and doing wolf business in other ways that maybe we haven't learned. But that particular order starts to make even more and more um, have more and more function or more and more important, excuse me, in the council process than in the more informal organization. Because if Bear is, you know, doing wolf duties in the council process, it can throw off the consensus. It can throw off the capacities for peaceful dialogue, right? Or if that deliberation has to come up, or what have you, or and so it's just not as smooth, right? So I think that's the speaking on the floor, for example, right? Um, starts to become important in that way. But they do go off into their respective clans, right? During that deliberation process, and then the representatives are listening to the voices of their respective clans, right? And I think this is a similar process in the preliminaries is as well, right? Where there's uh, the representatives, right, gathering the voices of their respective clans, but um, uh, you know, yeah, maybe there's a distinction there, right, between the preliminary meetings in terms of who's speaking on the floor. Maybe it's maybe the processes are a little bit more circumstantial or tailored to the individual clans. That's one thing the Longhouse told myself and Haas when trying to get a direct translation of these protocols, with them. I don't know if you were there in that meeting, but the Longhouse seemed to emphasize, you know, women's nation processes, for example, aren't going to be the same as everybody else's processes, right? It's whatever works for you guys, right? And so those preliminary meetings may take on a different look now that I think about it than the strictness, right, of the representatives, the only ones speaking on the floor in the council process. And so, but yeah, I don't want it to make it seem like there's no space for other voices other than the representatives in the council process, just on the floor, right? So I think there's this breaking off into your clans, right? If there needs be, and then representatives listening and then bringing that to the floor in the instances where it's needed. So just to clarify, and yeah, it's I think a recent realization of mine as well in terms of some of the built-in efficiencies for what are a lot of voices, right? So, yeah. Sorry for going on that tangent there, but I guess I just got thinking about the preliminaries a little bit as well, and how they're made efficient, right? But I think there's probably some distinctions there, you know.
But it's kind of like, no, thank you for that explanation. But also, there's this like when we've talked about preliminaries before, and more that like informal, clan dynamics. Like we've talked about how sometimes you're going to be a wolf, sometimes you're going to be a turtle, sometimes you're going to be a bear, depending on what the composition of the group is, right? And that can happen in these informal spaces. And the way that I phrased it, I think I said it out loud, but I've been saying it in my head as like being descriptive versus prescriptive with clans, right? And it's like sometimes you can just, like, if we're in that informal space, we can use clans as more like describing traits as we see them appear in people. But now when we're talking at this formal level, it is a little more prescriptive. It is like stay within your clan and like stick to that explicit structure for communication, to keep the peace, right? And so at that point, it is like a prescriptive clan, and it's like prescribed to like do your deliberations within your clan, and then have the representative represent those voices in the exchange on the floor at the formal council process. Yeah, I'll drop there. That's kind of just what I was thinking. I don't know.
No, it's interesting, right? And yeah, when they do go back into their clans, even in the formal instance, maybe some of those dynamic relationship between Turtle Wolf and Bear that have been, there's been some reps in the preliminaries start to pop up in the moment, right? Even in the formal processes as well. So even when you go into your clan, those dynamics of, okay, who's taking on turtle, wolf, and bear within us pops up right in the moment for sussing out whatever needs to be figured out in that moment. And then there's the snapping back into a collective bear clan or wolf clan or what have you. So yeah, it's interesting the interplay between or the contrast, right, between designation and the dynamics in between the designations as well. You know, so yeah, it's interesting to say the least, right? Physics of consensus, right? But yeah. I don't know, Ryder, if you have any questions, or Hero, or any comments. You know, we don't have to stay on the topic of formal decision making either. Although there may be some other things to talk about that are pretty interesting as well. But yeah, if there's any crosstalk of what's been said or what have you, we can flow.
Okay, I'll make a brief comment then. So I guess I'm almost like, because you and Has were talking about almost like putting into use and testing out already. So I'm already kind of like looking forward to actually using the stuff, trying out stuff. So even if I didn't attend today's meeting about Merrick's, or the discussion between Merritt and Arrow about whether there is formal versus informal versus usually they are more fluid, and then when it comes certain times it becomes less fluid, more structured. Even if I didn't hear all this before, if I was a new advocate that were jumping in next week or in a month, that person might just come in and experience the actual thing, process already. So I think back to what Merrick was saying, referring back to the longhouse thing about sort of experiencing it, which I didn't know about because I'm not as deep into the weeds like you guys, the longhouse stuff. But yeah, I'm looking forward to actually just everybody trying out that process, whether they have advanced knowledge of the process or not. They might come in and we might just say, this is generally how it goes, governance, and participate, give it a try. They may never even heard of Longhouse, um, because they're so new. Not that they don't want to, but they will get to know it over time. But yeah, I think my head is already like jumping to the next step, looking forward to actually people experiencing the product. That's where my head is at.
Yeah, no, yeah, and it's fitting, right? Because this is the function of the well, essentially, right? It's an access point for voices. You know, particularly, voices that that are looking to be heard, or asking questions about the system. But it's in the indigenous context, it's a critical function to peace. Folks feeling what you're describing, this access to the voice being heard through the well, right? Even if it's a smaller issue that gets picked up and answered, or even further, right? It's an issue that goes all the way to formal decision making. And like you said, even if you didn't intend to get into governance or catalyze a governance process, you see how little bureaucracy there is between you and your power of your voice in a decision making process, right? And yeah, it's one of the more exciting things that we've learned from these indigenous protocols, and part of what we mean by the function of autonomy. Uh, uh, yeah. Um, so yeah. Yeah, I don't know where we can, if there's any crosstalk off of that. Some interesting stuff in and of itself. I know I have some other thoughts, but I want to leave the floor open for any comments for folks.
I've got like a kind of like a bit of a weird, kind of deep, kind of emotional, kind of human response of what Hero was saying that I was kind of thinking of when he was talking. And I guess I've opened my mic now, so I guess I'll say it. I wasn't sure if I was gonna say it, but like when Hero was reiterating what I was saying about having kind of like a spectrum of over time different contexts in which we are in and we use our voice, and I've been thinking about that through like the chronological history of my own life and the different times I've used my voice and how it has been connected to my autonomy in different conversations, and sometimes very heated conversations that I've been a part of with different family members or friends or even sometimes strangers or like different representatives of different systems. And there's a feeling in the room. Um, I very much I'm an empathetic person, so I feel into the energies that are at play in a room more so than um, maybe standard or default settings, if that's even a thing that exists in human culture. But like um, there's been moments where I've felt the physics of social consensus, right? These things like the turtle watching, right? I've been a turtle watching in different like times in my life in watching heated conversations between two other parties, and I felt being bear before, and I've felt being wolf before, right? And these are all like different functions in my own life and my own like collection of human memories that I have from this life that I've lived. And man, when I come back to just that, uh, I guess discourse post it was, um, like I was gonna say like blog, right? But it's not really a blog. It's a discourse post that physics as social consensus. Like that's come up a few times just in my thoughts and thinking about how different situations have felt in my own life. Um, and I think there's like a very real way of describing what proof of autonomy can feel like. It's somehow built out of that, and I don't think I can words it right now. I don't think I can connect it. But like, let's just get kind of where my mind went to when he was speaking there. So I'll check and see if anyone wants to go off that. Thank you.
No, thank you kindly, Merrick. No, it's responses like that get my wheels turning too, right? Maybe a lens that I hadn't taken before, right? Or maybe we internalize rather than spell it out for ourselves, right? What does feel like a very relatable thing, right? Where you're for whatever reason, right? It's more conducive for you to be the observer and just validate it, and maybe there isn't much of a collective there to you know hold accountable or whatever, but you're just validating things being said against your own constitution, right? Or a collective that you are familiar with, validating against those values, and because that's the only trait left in the room, right? Everybody else has picked up the catalyst of the conversation, initiating a fiery conversation perhaps, and somebody else has taken up expanding on the conversation, keeping the issue alive, right? As the Bear Clan would be doing, right? And within its function, within its traits of this knowledge of all knowledge of transition, transformation, medicine, bridge work, care work, right? Keeping an issue alive that needs to be kept alive that one time out of 10. And yeah, I think we can all relate to, maybe playing, those different, or falling into these different traits just in conversations organically and at different times. And so, yeah, this is, I don't know, you brought me into a barbershop or other family settings where, the different personality types or traits or just topic of conversation determines that, right? And so, yeah, it's, I think, a good analogy for us to maybe fall back on for trying to articulate this to folk. But it obviously made me think a little bit about, welcome, Zero. We're yes, welcome. Yeah. Feel free to unmute and introduce yourself if you'd like. We're just getting into, or we've been discussing for a little while now, some of how our research in Indigenous design is going to relate to some of our tooling coming up soon, and how we're excited about this all coming together, and hopefully this recording of this session helps folks understand, exactly how the different clan system in the system design relates to decision-making processes and consensus decision-making processes. So we're pretty we're kind of in the weeds of that right now, and but you're more than welcome to ask any question. There's no bad questions for folks that may be new to some of these concepts, and we were just going over different ways of how some of this can be as digestible as possible for folks. But yeah, you're welcome to join in, and ask any questions, comments, anything that's happening here. But yeah, we were just leaving off on an analogy that Merrick made of how maybe we can relate to the different traits of the different clans and their respective roles in formal decision-making processes, which get a little bit more specific than some of the more informal organization that we've spoken to before in these sessions. But yeah, I'll leave the floor open for folks that want to expand on some of that. Maybe the crosstalk will help bring Zero into the conversation a little bit more. But yeah, we can also just stop and allow Zero to introduce themselves if they'd like. You don't have to either.
Has Hi Zero, have you been to some of these sessions before? And how much do you know? I'm just curious.
That's not a fair question. How much do you know?
No, just like where he's at, and then we can try and catch up to.
Yeah, no, I know you.
If
mean,
you know what I mean. Not like.
This is what you know. Welcome, Zero. Did you get around to that form all right?
Hey, yeah, sorry I had all those questions. I wasn't
No, you're
sure.
fine.
The graphic that you shared with me, there was the link to the GitHub, but it wasn't in the README file, so I wasn't sure how to select that. But yeah, but that was helpful.
No problem at all. I'm definitely here to help answer questions and make things more clear, or if I don't know, pass it on to somebody else who does. So yeah, for sure. It's really nice to have you in the session. I think this might be, like Hiro said, maybe one of your first dialogues, right?
I periodically join these when I have time on the calendar, because I really like the advocates, and hopefully too, because we have the Zero Authority DAO up and running. We still have a lot of things to get done, but one of the things I'm going to task just put a bounty out there, is to put together some information on the Stacks Advocates, because it helped me tremendously, and I don't think you guys get enough credit for what you do. It's it's definitely needed, and it helped me get my first start into kind of join the ecosystem and the community, and it showed me how to build and thrive together with the community. So we have the initial beginning of our community treasury for Zero Authority DAO, and we're going to allocate a couple of funds. We also have probably Stack Swap going to join us first as far as like a community partner, and allocate a little bit of contributions from their treasury. And so we're going to put some more information together too. It's still we're still early in the journey. We have the beginnings of our Creator Hub, which is a collection of 3 different tools, which is the first one's going to be a Web3 creator marketplace where anyone can come and join. And there's going to be a mix of protocols who need Web3 creators, whatever it is. So the Advocates focuses internally on Stacks ecosystem, and we hope to be like that external force where we can all partner and collaborate together and just be the community arm within Stacks. And so I'm definitely going to need you guys too, and I go back and forth with Haas here periodically, but I definitely want to keep us engaged, keep reaching out to you, and when we get ready, I want to show you exactly what we plan to do. So the Creator Hub is going to be the marketplace where we match supply and demand. If you need some creative works done, even if you need a smart contract audit done, well, hopefully we can bring those people in. Then we'll have this like a knowledge wall where people can say, hey, I'm making these creative works and I'd like to put it on that wall. And it'll be different categories that you can select for however you want to get educated. It could be tweet threads, it can be video content, it can be blogs, it can be a lot of forms of different creative content. And then from there, once we have this library and catalog of information, creators will be able to say, hey, I want to bring like the learn to earn content together. And once we build that, they can put their content there and people can come in and say, I want to learn about these things. And so we just need to find a way to monetize that and be able to reward creative works there and keep building the DAO treasury, because we'd love to fund different community projects eventually. But yeah, thanks for getting back to me on that, on the survey.
That's I think that's really interesting because I've seen you around on Twitter and stuff. But I didn't know you were doing like such a big project. And I would just echo what Zero has said. Like you guys don't get enough credit because I also really want to incorporate like what you guys doing here to the Discord I somehow started running. And I think the more people can use whatever you guys create here and sort of extend that into the community, I think will be a really good way to really start having the impact. So I like to say to Zero, those stuff you're talking about and how you're gonna incorporate Stacks Advocates would be really good, interesting to keep in touch from time to time because I'm also running a Discord and I like to help onboard more people. But I'm more like doing the NFT stuff, but also like would like to do more educational content, but more like just simpler on onboarding people content, I think. But I think would be good to check in with different community people, like especially with Zero, who is already an advocate and have wants to incorporate Stacks Advocate, and maybe it can be a collective effort to have various Discord runners who are all trying to incorporate what the guys are doing here.
Yeah, and I've seen your tweets too, Hero. and Harold, I forgot to tell you, you sent me a link to like the early small societies and how communities gathered, because we were talking about early formation of DAOs, and so thank you for sending me that. That was pretty lengthy, but it was really good.
Oh, I forgot exactly what I sent, but
No, no,
I,
no. It was Harold. Harold sent me that document.
oh,
It
Hero.
was yeah, yeah. But yeah. So Hero, to get back to what you were saying, our hope is one, we need more people to continue to come in. This isn't a zero sum game. It isn't like we provide education and learning content, so there isn't a place for you or Stacks Advocate. There is a place for all of us here, and even there's this is just an early formation of an NFT marketplace and utility and how you use it and how you have in-game assets. So just like the coverage and content around that is going to continue to evolve. It really reminds me of just like early gameplay, like when you had like the NES Nintendo, and now you look 30 years later and we have metaverses. So there's going to be so much um, evolution, content, communities around that, and with what we're doing too, and the platform that we build, we hope to eventually be able to, everything's open source that we're building. Nothing is behind walls. So first and foremost, a lot of people talk about decentralization, but uh, a lot of DAOs and a lot of teams are early in that decentralization, right? So eventually, it's not going to be me who's orchestrating the work. We're going to have the orchestration of work be decentralized into. Right now, it's looking like you have a mission, values, and those things are constant. Those don't change. But then you have the proposals for priorities. So if the community votes on 3 priorities for the year, we orchestrate around that, and people go off and build in that direction, but build with the intention behind the DAO. So those are just some like early ideas that we have to decentralize more over time. But what I will say is the platform that we are building, because it is open source and because we want to continue to build a small treasury to fund projects. If someone like you says, hey, I want to link my NFTs into your learn to earn, I would say, I would love for you to do that. We don't, whatever amount of funds that we do have, we would love to reward you and whoever else wants to build on the platform so you guys can go faster. And we'd work with the Stack advocates to put some content together. We'd work with the Stack grants to say, hey, we need some more funding so we could bring more builders or more content creators on, or whatever roles we need. So as these things mature and evolve, it'll be clear to see exactly how you could come in, how exactly you can do a contribution and get rewarded. So like the source cred system, right? It's not the best system in the world, but it is the best for what we have in Web3, right? The way to say, hey, this is the contribution I made. This is the allocation of that pool. I mean, that's the best way to do it today. How in 10 years and 20 years, it's going to look completely different, right? And we will get these things figured out. But as we continue to build and as you guys continue to build, if we keep all of these things open source so we can use them as Lego blocks, that's going to be a huge win for everyone in Web3.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The source
Thank you
credit,
guys
everything is really
and
cool.
Hero for a lot of kind words there. It's hard to express the gratitude for some of the nice things you guys said there. I would echo the transformative potential of open source, right? Even some of the tooling that we're getting together, right? Haas has been doing some beautiful work with PolicyKit and the folks at MetaGov, right? Out of Harvard, in Stanford research, Oxford research, and we're combining it with even newer iterations of source cred coming up soon, right? Which is again going to be visible to folks like yourself, right? And to see, okay, why make this change, right? What are the benefits to clarity or community tinkering with the algorithm that's tracking contributions, and of course this is a part of the long-time ethos of Stacks, right? And the strong convictions of open source values. I've learned a lot from folks who have much more experience, right? Working for open source companies, right? Even some of the, for a while, right? Like a Dan or, other folks in the ecosystem. So yeah, it's beautiful to still see this ethos, well and alive, right? And folks like yourself. Yes, this is a beautiful thing.
Zero, are you? Do you know the new school Degens people? Or are you part of their team?
Yeah, we had him on a Twitter Space a few weeks
Oh,
back.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, we talked to them. They're really phenomenal guys. They also too they have an athletic background, which I think is great because they're not engineers by trade, but like they have a background in athletics, and they can get a whole new cohort involved in Stacks. And so many people, I like what Layer's doing too, right, with the whole International Women's Day and her NFTs and their virtual event. That's going to get a whole another cohort involved in Stacks. And I really think Stacks does a great job of getting people who are not familiar with blockchain or Bitcoin involved, because a lot of what you see around like Ethereum or Solana is kind of like the same old, right? It's a lot of dudes and a lot of younger dudes, but I think especially with some of these projects like City Coins, you have XChain. XChain is a women-led company too, and they're going to have fertility data using Stacks blockchain and secured by Bitcoin. You have Thea Petra building real estate to bring on chain. So you're going to see Stacks go after these really legacy hard markets to corner. And if you get healthcare, real estate, and then city municipalities, I mean, you corner what society is built on right there, right? So then like these whole innovations, and don't get me wrong, Ethereum, Polygon, and Solana, they've been making some inroads and they've been doing great stuff, but what we're doing here on Stacks is secured by Bitcoin. So Bitcoin at some point in probably, I don't know, 2040, 2050, it will be the world reserve currency. It's just on that trajectory, right? Right now, we when it first started, it was just like some virtual currency no one ever heard of. Now it's a store of value. And I do predict that it will go back to being what the virtual currency was meant to be, but it's going to be all secured by Web3 too. It will be the foundational building block. So everything that we're doing right now in Stacks, we're headed towards this future path of decentralization. And if we could start building those structures to have our collective minds in a decentralized way orchestrate around like priorities or pods or work collaboratives, however we want to call it. And I highly encourage, maybe Harold can drop that link to the early formations of humanity. It was really insightful, just kind of like looking at early formations of like civilization coming from like Egypt into like the modern society. A lot of people forget that humanity kind of started in the same way, where we are kind of trying to orchestrate in this virtualized metaverse or just kind of in cyberspace too. So yeah, so sorry for the long-winded answer, Hira.
No, man, it's better you than me, man. Yeah. This is all dialogue is welcome here, and it's hard to have a tangent that's unrelated. You know, yeah. We'll leave it open. I don't know if any of that.
Can I ask a quick question? What are you guys going to do with the policy? What was the application called? How's that going to be integrated?
Policy kit, yeah, policy kit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if you're interested, one of the things we were speaking about right before you came in was the advantages of experience, right? In in understanding some of these implementations. And Haas, I think, is just wrapped up what is ready to start being debugged by the community now. A consensus flow that uses Policy Kit largely to ensure that there's these community decided upon windows of time to engage in important decision making, right, around certain structural changes in advocates or what have you. And so, yeah, we'll be tying in our research on Indigenous protocols for organization through through a three-tiered clan design, right? And using Policy Kit to assist our consensus flows between the clans, right? And so that'll be coming up throughout this week in terms of gathering folks who might be interested in testing out some of this tooling for the first time. And Haas has done some remarkable stuff in the way of user experience where folks don't even have to wrap their heads around uploading documents to Policy Kit or what have you, because just a post in the Discord will automatically upload important documents of decision making and important documents for the flow, which could all theoretically be attached to a Stacks chain, right, and become if Policy Kit becomes Stacks native the way that it's already near chain native, and so we can start to have some pointers to off-chain processes on chain, right, which is a beautiful microcosm of what we're trying to achieve between on and off-chain DAO-like structures, right? So yeah, that's all coming up soon. So myself and Hero will likely keep folks like yourself that are interested in this in the loop of when we'll be testing this collectively. And the forum that I heard you and Ryder going back and forth on is important for that, right? Or a meeting that goes along with that forum, right? Is important for the folks that'll be some of the first testers of these toolings. So yeah, hopefully that gets you as excited as I am. I could barely spit it out fast enough. I'm still lingering.
No, that's great. That's great. Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that, and I appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm gonna have to run, but I appreciate you guys, Harold and Haas. Thank you guys.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank everybody here, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you for dropping in. It's beautiful to hear you.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. You too. That's nice. It's
See
always
ya.
nice, right?
Yeah, it sounds like he just wants to implement it now. So he just want to plug the product in to what he's running.
Yeah. I like how almost seamless it is, right, for folks to pick up on the models and the tooling together. Just in being in contact or dialogue. Briefly, right? I think I'll be honest, I hardly remember our interaction or how long ago it was now. So yeah, it's pretty exciting in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I can see definitely a lot of people like him or even myself, like just want to start using the creation here and plug it into, because a lot of communities are based in Discord and how different community members interact. And if there is something simple that I can just take or install into the Discord and start using, I think when that's ready, I think that will be very directly impactful.
Yeah. This is I'm getting more and more excited as more and more angles pop up. But yeah, I don't want to take us too far away from a flow we were in and the clans and how they relate to decision making. Are there any other things that have popped up in folks' head as we've been going along, or any just general questions folks have maybe been thinking about? Ryder, Merrick, Haas, I don't know if you have any questions that popped up and some of you are getting real close to these flows recently. course, I always have my 2 cents, but I want to leave some dead air for y'all to fill.
Maybe I'll ask Merrick a question. To his comment that he was saying earlier about different situation and how he's empathetic. So did you mean like you feel almost like comfortable voicing your voice here, but at some other occasions with different group of people, you may not feel as comfortable speaking out? Was that what you meant in a simple sense?
I think what you just said could be like maybe a conclusion that you could draw from what I said, and I think yeah, that applies. It's not really what I meant, but I think like that's a valid thing to pull from what I said. I was talking more about just like my entire life, like before blockchain, before even really being online, right? There's
Yeah,
been different situations that I've been in
yeah,
where I've like felt these different pulls, right? And I've recently been thinking about tying about how those like interactions and what I observed is like the interactions between people can be named by dynamics between turtle, wolf, and bear, and how that ties into the physics of social consensus, and then like extrapolating from there down to like I used to be and still kind of am latently, but like a couple years back I was big into AI and VR, right? I was always going into like when you're making like inverse kinematics was still like a kind of a problem people were like poking at in university back when I was still in it. It's kind of like pretty handled by like frameworks now, but like when you're thinking about how body parts move around, right, and the neural networks that are inside there to making those decisions, and I just used to spend a lot of time thinking about that, and like this physics of social consensus when you tie it a little bit into this like I guess indigenous cosmology, this Ganyagahaga cosmology of recognizing like the microcosm within the macrocosm. That's not the right word, but tying in like what's happening at the very small and how that can fractal through like almost what I used to think of as like probability decision matrices over time of like 3-dimensional space and like time, right?